How go your plans to conquer the world?
You can tell how much aura a villain has before they do anything. Before the first fight, before the first speech, before anyone gets hurt.
What are you doing here?
Ah, look at you. The brightest boy on the island.
Sometimes all it takes is the way they walk into a room, or the way everyone else reacts when they do. That's aura. And somehow, How to Train Your Dragon is packed with villains who mastered it. Today, we're ranking every How to Train Your Dragon villain by one thing alone: pure aura. F tier. Mildew. Mildew is a Viking on Berk. He has lived, for what appears to be decades, in direct proximity to some of the most dangerous creatures to ever exist on this planet. Fire-breathing, battle-hardened apex predators. And his response to that proximity, writing formal complaints to the chief, that is the whole thing. That is his entire strategy.
Dragons are wild beasts. There's no telling what else they'll do behind our sleeping bags.
He doesn't fight. He doesn't scheme at any level that would require actual intelligence. He sees a dragon, registers that he doesn't like it, and immediately goes looking for a supervisor to report it to. In a franchise built on warlords, trained assassins, and Viking mythology, Mildew's primary weapon is escalating to management. Now, the writers did attempt to give him actual stakes. There's an arc in Riders of Berk where Mildew starts collaborating with the outcasts to sabotage Berk from the inside. On paper, that reads as elevated threat.
Here you are, trapped by a silly old man and his sheep.
In execution, it reads as a grumpy farmer loudly agreeing with whoever is currently paying him attention. The betrayal carries the emotional weight of a passive-aggressive note left in a shared kitchen. What makes this worse is that every ounce of influence he has is borrowed. The moment Stoic stops believing him over Hiccup, he has nothing. No backup, no resources, no presence that existed independent of other people's temporary poor judgment. He didn't even get a dramatic exit. He just stops appearing. His sheep, Fungus, had more consistent screen presence. His sheep had a name people remember. His sheep, who did not speak once, held more narrative weight than the man holding the leash. Riker Grimborn. Riker Grimborn has a fleet. He has dragon-proof equipment. He has subordinates who visibly fear him and a physical build that communicates genuine danger before he opens his mouth. All of that is real. And watching Riker try to be threatening is still somehow the most aggressively forgettable experience Race to the Edge offers across 6 seasons. He hits things until they stop moving, he resets, he repeats, he does not adapt, he does not reflect, he does not arrive at a new approach. Riker fighting Hiccup in Episode 1 looks functionally identical to Riker fighting Hiccup in Episode 40 because there's nothing evolving beneath the surface.
Don't say I didn't give you a chance.
He's a one-solution villain trapped in a franchise full of problems that require more than one solution. The problem isn't that he's a brute. Brute force villains can be fantastic. The problem is that's all Riker ever is. Riker doesn't have that. There is no intelligence choosing restraint. There is just Riker waiting in the general direction of whatever needs hitting. The defining moment of his entire presence in this franchise is when Viggo tells him, to his face, in front of their shared subordinates, that he lacks finesse. And Riker's response is to stand there, not angry, not defensive, just present, because he knows it's accurate and genuinely does not have the emotional architecture to be bothered by it. That's it. That was the reason. You don't land in F tier because you're physically weak. You land in F tier because being dangerous in exactly one specific way with nothing else whatsoever behind it is not aura. It's just mass with a bad haircut. D tier. The Red Death. She sits inside a volcano and demands that every dragon in a significant radius steal food for her on a permanent, non-negotiable basis. Not because she negotiated this arrangement. Not because she built loyalty, but because she is large enough that refusing results in being consumed. That is not authority. That is a very aggressive landlord with a flight range. Now, she is physically overwhelming. When she erupts from the ground in the first film's final act, everything stops. Hiccup freezes. The score shifts. Every other threat in the movie suddenly feels like it was competing in the minor leagues.
This isn't over! Form your ranks! Hold together!
that transition lands because the scale is genuine. The presence in that moment is real. You feel it. But the scary part is, presence and aura are not the same thing. Presence is what happens when something large appears. Aura is intentional. It's cultivated. It is the deliberate way you occupy space even before anything occurs. The Red Death did not choose anything. She simply kept existing until existing became too large to challenge, and then she kept demanding food. When Hiccup removes her sight, she has nothing beneath it. No second option, no adaptation, no response beyond flying into a gas cloud she produced herself. The most physically dominant villain in the original film is defeated not by a more powerful weapon, but by the simple fact that she operated in only one gear, D tier. Presence without depth has a ceiling. She found it fast. Eret, son of Eret. Eret, son of Eret. And I want you to notice how much work that name is doing before this man opens his mouth. The repetition, the weight behind it, that is a name constructed to convey that this person has history. He arrives in How to Train Your Dragon 2 as a dragon trapper, a man who catches dragons and delivers them to Drago Bloodfist for a living. Not out of belief, not out of any philosophy, because it pays and Drago hasn't killed him yet. His entire moral framework at the introduction is, whoever is currently threatening me receives my full and immediate cooperation. That's the baseline. Now, Eret has surface aura. He's physically imposing. He's smooth. He speaks like someone who has repeatedly navigated genuinely dangerous situations and developed a rhythm for doing so with minimal damage to himself. When he first appears, there's something there. A mercenary competence that implies survival has been earned through being very good at a specific thing. Then you watch his decisions under actual pressure and the aura hollows out. Because Eret's loyalty and Eret's menace are the same thing. They both belong to whoever is currently the largest threat in the room. The moment someone threatens him more than his current employer does, everything recalculates. His danger is entirely borrowed. He's renting it from Drago, and when Drago is no longer viable, the rental agreement ends. And that's where things get crazy, because the character pivot works. His eventual shift to the other side lands narratively, but it works precisely because we always sensed the aura wasn't owned. A villain whose menace evaporates the second the source of pressure changes never had an aura to begin with. He had positioning. C tier. Alvin the Treacherous. Say the name out loud. Alvin the Treacherous. That name is doing narrative work before the character appears on screen. The syllables promise a scheming, uncatchable, perpetually 3 steps ahead antagonist who has been engineering your downfall since before you realized you had one. And then you watch him lose to a teenager. Repeatedly, across 2 full seasons of television, and the math starts getting uncomfortable. Look, the charisma functions. Alvin walks into a scene, and the room responds. He speaks like a man who has memorized every exit and doesn't feel the need to mention it. The physicality commands space. The delivery has weight. When Alvin addresses someone directly, there is a texture to the threat that lands. That component of his aura is genuine.
Tell me, who's your dragon conqueror, eh? Tell me!
The record is the issue. For someone whose entire identity is built on being the treacherous one, the man who outmaneuvers everyone, who operates at an angle nobody else sees coming, Alvin gets outmaneuvered with remarkable consistency. He loses his chiefdom. He gets leveraged by players operating at levels he can't reach. He gets betrayed by people he thought he controlled. For a man with that name, carrying that energy, his actual results read as ambitious middle management that keeps getting promoted just past its competence ceiling. And that's where things get crazy, because when Alvin evolves and his character genuinely deepens, it works. It works because the charisma was always real, and you believed it. The shift lands because the original threat landed. But C tier is where the math settles. Everything the name promises, the track record chips away at, piece by piece. Krogan. If Alvin's problem is the gap between projected threat and actual results, Krogan's problem is the exact reverse. His results are airtight, and his aura is a laminated operations manual. Krogan commands the Dragonflyers. Every conversation he has is formatted like a briefing. Every threat arrives at a consistent emotional volume of 0. Now, watch what Krogan actually does, and a different picture takes shape. He's the only villain in the franchise who approaches aerial combat as a logistics operation. He doesn't just deploy forces, he designs the battlefield before the engagement starts. He cuts escape routes. He signals his dragonflyers with such precision that his units outpace Burke's riders on raw reaction time alone.
Reverence? It's a dangerous emotion, Viggo.
That is genuinely impressive. It is also genuinely aggressively difficult to care about, because Aura needs something to catch on.
Now, which hut calls to me?
A line that stays with you. A moment of vanity or vulnerability that communicates a person is making decisions rather than a system running its programmed sequence. Krogan offers none of this. There is nothing to rattle because there's no ego present to rattle. He doesn't savor victories. He's already on the next objective before you've finished processing the current one. He edges past Alvin in this tier for one specific reason. Alvin's pride can be wounded. Krogan doesn't appear to have pride, just objectives. A villain with no ego is quietly the most unsettling kind, but never the most memorable. B tier. Savage. Here is a man who has spent the majority of his screen time caught directly between two different flavors of volatile. Alvin's scheming frustration and Dagur's complete absence of self-regulation. And has survived both by becoming extraordinarily good at the single skill of not being the most useful person in any given crisis. That is nothing. Surviving that specific environment for that long requires a level of situational awareness that most protagonists in this franchise don't demonstrate consistently. Now, Savage is not a primary threat. He doesn't lead anything. He doesn't have an ideological agenda. What he has is positioning. He's present in nearly every major Outcast operation. He relays information between factions that would otherwise communicate exclusively through property damage. He is the connective tissue of every antagonist alliance he's part of, and he does it while making sure nobody notices how essential that connective tissue is. The scary part is that this is a form of aura. Savage's energy is the specific energy of someone who knows considerably more than he's sharing and has correctly calculated that volunteering that information would make him immediately valuable and immediately targetable. He keeps himself below the radar not by accident, but by design. Every instinct he has tells him not to be the most interesting person in the room, and he follows those instincts with remarkable, consistent precision. He's watched every plan around him collapse. He's watched Alvin get outmaneuvered. He's watched Dagur implode from a front row seat. And he ends more scenes standing than he started, not by overpowering anyone, but by correctly identifying which hills were worth dying on and then avoiding every single one of them. Dagur the Deranged. By every reasonable metric, Dagur should not have this much aura. He is loud. He is unpredictable in the least calculated way possible. He laughs at demonstrably wrong moments. His planning process appears to involve waiting until a strong feeling arises and then acting on it immediately. There is no visible gap between impulse and action, and he has never once expressed concern about this. None of that is a recipe for presence.
Stay here!
Why?
Let's see, I don't know, maybe because I said so!
And yet, Dagur walks into every scene he occupies, and the entire atmosphere reconfigures around him. Because the specific thing Dagur has, the thing that can't be taught or manufactured, is that complete, unconditional refusal to feel uncertain. He is never once in doubt about his next move, not because he's reasoned through the possibilities, because he has never, not once, considered the existence of doubt as relevant to his situation. Irrational confidence sustained at this level doesn't read as recklessness. It reads as a completely separate operating system. The scene where he captures Hiccup and immediately decides they're best friends defines his entire character in a single moment. He doesn't interrogate, he doesn't make a traditional threat, he throws a party, he shares a meal, he laughs like a man who has just met the most important person in his life. Then mentions, mid-celebration, that he might have Hiccup killed at some point, and his expression during both statements is identical. Same warmth, same volume, same complete absence of irony. That's it. That was the reason. You cannot read Dagur because Dagur is not performing. What you see is what is actually happening inside him at all times. And what's happening inside him at all times is something no one in this franchise can categorize or prepare a strategy against. And honestly, that is the most dangerous form of aura available. You can outthink a tactician. You can outmaneuver a schemer once you identify the pattern. You cannot out-improvise someone who has never once experienced a situation as something to be afraid of. A tier. Traitor Johan. Johan the storyteller spent years as recurring background furniture. A merchant, a stammering, nervous comic presence who sold questionable items from a structurally optimistic boat and appeared at convenient moments to hand Hiccup exactly the information he needed to move forward. Nobody feared Johan. Nobody thought about Johan between his appearances. He was ambient. He was the franchise's emotional reset button, the harmless figure you saw after a tense episode and felt your shoulders drop. He was precisely, deliberately, methodically what he needed to be. When the stammer stops and the mask comes off, the scene works not because the shock is enormous, though it is. The shock fades. What stays is the quality of his voice the moment the performance ends. He doesn't transform into a different person. He doesn't erupt. He simply speaks clearly, looks at Hiccup with complete calm, and lists, without emotion, without pride, without any indication this required effort. Every location Hiccup revealed, every plan Hiccup shared, every fear Hiccup mentioned across years of warm dockside conversations. Hiccup didn't just trust Johan. He used Johan as a confidant. He voluntarily handed Johan the exact tools Johan needed to dismantle him, freely. Because Johan seemed like the safest person in the archipelago to talk to. What makes this worse is the timeline. This wasn't a short con. This was years of consistent, patient, relationship-building performance. Every moment you watched him, flustered and grateful and harmless, he was filing information, building access, cultivating trust he intended to spend at a time of his choosing on terms entirely his own. You can train against a soldier. You can eventually adapt against a manipulator once you've identified the manipulation. You cannot undo years of genuinely believing someone was in your corner. That's not a tactical failure. That's a wound that reopens every time you think about it. Grimmel the Grizzly. Grimmel doesn't enter scenes. He arrives. And he treats that distinction as a professional standard he maintains without exception. From the moment How to Train Your Dragon. 3 introduces him, the film's emotional register shifts. Not because his army is the largest, Drago had more. Not because he's the most physically imposing, Drago had more of that too. Because Grimmel moves through every scene with the specific, unhurried energy of someone who has already calculated every outcome and is simply waiting for the world to catch up to conclusions he reached well in advance. His first meaningful action is to show up at Hiccup's home. Uninvited, unannounced, during what is presumably downtime, and instead of attacking, he sits, makes himself comfortable, then explains, with the measured patience of a professor who is quietly disappointed in his student, precisely how he plans to remove Toothless, dismantle everything Hiccup has built, and do it at a time of his own choosing. Then he stands up and leaves. No violence, no demonstration, just the information. Because the information was the message, and the message had already landed before he sat down. The scary part is that Grimmel is not performing with confidence. He is reporting accuracy. He hunted an entire species, Night Furies, to near extinction. Not through raw power, through the sustained, patient application of superior understanding applied over years. He doesn't tame dragons. He reduces them to controlled variables in his framework. He doesn't win battles. He removes the structural possibility of losing them before they begin. And his trap inside the hidden world, which accounts for every decision Hiccup makes in exact sequence, is not fortune. It is the product of studying his target so thoroughly that anticipation and control become functionally identical. S tier, Viggo Grimborn. Every other villain in this franchise operates at the level of force, manipulation, or chaos. Viggo Grimborn operates at the level of philosophy, and there is a meaningful distance between those categories that most animated villains never bother crossing. He is the intelligence behind the dragon hunters, the mind that makes Riker, a man we placed in F tier 20 minutes ago, functional and organized. And from his very first scene, Viggo establishes something no other villain in this franchise manages. He is genuinely interested in Hiccup, not as an obstacle to eliminate, as a problem worth studying, as a worthy opponent. Classification that carries its own specific danger because people who study you are categorically more threatening than people who simply want to destroy you. His opening move is the Dragon's Eye game. A strategy game he introduces to Hiccup is framed as a casual intellectual exercise. And inside that exercise, he teaches Hiccup, calmly, unhurriedly, exactly how outclassed they are from each other. Not with weapons, not with armies. By winning so completely that the defeat functions as a lesson about how differently they process the same information. Now, most villains reveal strength through action. Viggo reveals strength through conversation. Every dialogue between him and Hiccup is a controlled dismantling dressed as a discussion. He lets Hiccup make a point, acknowledges it genuinely, then reframes it with such precision that Hiccup's position becomes supporting evidence for Viggo's own argument. He doesn't overpower you intellectually, he redirects you and lets you feel it happening. And that's where things get crazy. Viggo is the only villain in the franchise who could sit across from Hiccup, speak no direct threat, and still communicate that the situation was already settled. The certainty doesn't arrive through force or volume. It arrives through the texture of every exchange he's ever had. That is not a performance. That is cognitive control operating at a level where physical threat starts to feel almost beside the point. Drago Bloodfist. And here is the only villain in the entire trilogy who actually won. Not almost won. Not temporarily. He won. Hiccup at his absolute sharpest. Toothless beside him. Stoic standing in his way. An army of trained dragons behind Burke. Drago tore through all of it. He turned toothless against Hiccup. He seized control of every dragon on the battlefield. He killed Stoic. And he did it with the emotional intensity of someone checking items off a grocery list. That's not power. That's aura. What separates Drago from everyone else, even Viggo, is that nothing about him feels performative. Viggo projects control through intelligence. Drago doesn't project anything. The moment he enters a scene, everyone immediately understands they're standing in front of something they were never meant to defeat. His backstory explains why. After surviving the dragon attack that destroyed his village, Drago devoted his entire life to making sure nothing could ever control him again. Every decision, every battle, every conquest came from that single obsession. That's why Hiccup can't reach him. Every other villain has a weakness to exploit, a crack in their philosophy or a relationship to manipulate. Drago doesn't. The only reason he loses isn't because Hiccup breaks him, it's because Toothless chooses Hiccup. An empire built on fear collapsed the moment fear stopped working. That's what makes Drago one of the most intimidating villains DreamWorks has ever created. Let me know in the comments where you'd rank these villains, and whether you think Viggo deserved that S tier or if Drago should have had it entirely to himself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch the next video shown on screen.